Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest edition of Life Challenges, which will be on depression. And this is going to be slightly different because both Canela, Michelle, and myself will be sharing on this topic our own experience. So, hi, Canela. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Jane. Hello, and good morning from the West Coast.
And good afternoon from the East Coast. So we haven't actually, apart from sharing the two of us, Canela and myself, in the first half, and allowing people to come in with your experience and questions in the second half, we haven't actually decided how we're going to do this. Canela, there's some noise. I don't know whether it's from you or from somebody else.
There's no sounds here. It's completely quiet.
Make sure that they mute themselves in case they aren't. Somebody's not muted here. Please check whether you're muted. In case you aren't, just make sure you mute yourself. So I'm wondering whether, Canela, maybe you would like to start off. Basically, we were talking about our experience of depression in a private call. And we felt that it was interesting to share that because we realized that depression took a different form in our experience. So it wasn't quite the same. And so it was really interesting to see that. And we thought that it would be also interesting to hear that what we call depression is not necessarily always the same thing. It's very individual for everybody. So, Canela, go ahead.
Okay.
If that's okay by you. And by the way, the noise does come from your mic.
Because there's no sounds here.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll just continue because
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on. That there's nothing.
I may just need to mute you when you're not speaking.
Okay. So, first off, I'd like to invite everybody to just allow their bodies to relax open, to settle in to where you are, just simply because it's always easier to hear and receive what's being shared from a relaxed and open space, as well as it's always a good idea. There's never a moment that isn't worthy of relaxing open to. And I include moments of depression when that energy is present, that is worthy of opening to. It's been my finding 100% when such an energy is present for myself and others that it's invitational to some aspect of consciousness that wants to be known. So how come I know this quite personally is because depression does run in my family, and specifically my mother, who's still in her body, and I work with from time to time. It's not really work, it's support, I suppose. But it's such a mutual love, it's not really work either. I mean, we're talking about my mom. But prior to being able to support her, I needed to support myself. And I have found that it's not something that doesn't show up, even though the awakened, realized state is here. Because collectively, I'm not separate from all that is. And that's just how it shows up sometimes here. is if that energy is very strong in the world, um, I tend to hear some here within this system of Canela Michelle and open to it. And again, gifts both for myself, and I bow to everyone and support them in falling in with these energies by doing so myself, because we're not separate. So each person who dares to open to an energy called depression actually supports every person uh, who's alive in body to also open to these energies. Um, so my way of meeting these is first to notice if that murky energy. I'm imagining that everybody here has experienced depression in some way. I'm going to describe a little bit of how it shows up for me, or how it has. It's often shown up quite differently, and where I am in this okayness with everything. It sometimes has to be a little present with me for quite a while uh, in order to hear. Oh, wait a moment! Here, there's something consistently happening, and if I can hear myself diagnose myself and say, oh, I feel somewhat depressed. As soon as the mind has identified the energy as depression, then there's something to open to. So I invite people then to find where is the energy being depressed in the body. If that word shows up, the energy will be depressed somewhere. So it's flipping awareness into the inside of what appears as the interior of the system and opening to the energy of whatever's presenting, wherever it's presenting, and breathing and opening to whatever that is, whatever's being expressed there. And this is said so simply, but it's not all that easy, because there's this sort of background idea that if you open to it, it might make more of whatever that is. And my experience of depression isn't a yummy experience, but that's how consciousness gets my attention, um, by something that's not so yummy and repeats itself like depression can. It shows up often for myself as a murky, sort of thick energy where I feel subdued and almost like a drug, and maybe there are chemicals running, um, where everything starts to sort of blur and things are less radiant, um, less clear and crisp on the edges of what appears in consciousness, uh, in a visual aspect, and then also a murky subduedness of experience, and sometimes a heaviness as well, almost like a gray, heavy cloak has come and is mixing and mingling with all of the energy of whatever is appearing, whatever is happening. And that's why it's sometimes hard to find it, is because it just becomes a part of all of it. And of course, it's that way because it's present in this system. I'm actually viewing life with that energy present. So it all makes practical sense when it's here. And so what I've found in opening to those energies in the moment is often joy. It's the oddest thing, um, that I would then turn awareness towards, resting with this energy, breathe, remind myself I'm okay, and it's energy showing up like this. Because when you rename it as energy, it's much easier to open to in the moment. So I'm breathing, I'm reminding myself I'm okay, I'm right here, so I'm kind of talking to the human aspect of myself. It's all right, you're okay. And then I'm opening to it while I breathe. And it's like an unknownness, because of course I don't know what's there. I'm pushing it down at some level, but it's not really me. It's consciousness, because I totally was unaware of holding any kind of energy. So when it's occurred, it's a bit trickier to talk about it when it's actually not present in this moment. I'm noticing. Um, And at the same time, yeah, I think there's enough here for people to get the idea of what I'm talking about. Um, but I can share a little bit about, um, like with my mother, what often has happened with her is that it's a big black hole, and she feels afraid of the black openness of that, and that's to her this darkness of that she calls depression. And each time that when I've because I've encouraged her, call me in the middle of it, Mom, because usually she doesn't like to call, um, because she thinks it somehow can taint my day with darkness, and so she tends to keep on her own. And so I feel such a happiness when she calls and she's in the midst of it and she's weepy and tearful, and scared of whatever this is, and then gradually supporting her to breathe and recognize that she's already with the energy, so she can be with it, and it's already happening. And then gradually, as she relaxes, somewhat with the support of, I guess, what it is my confidence of meeting these energies, she's opened into the emptiness itself, into the vastness, and then finds out once she lets go to it, it's okay, it's all right. And so that's been a support for her to that the depression doesn't take her quite so deeply. It still shows up every now and again, as it does with myself. And when it does, she's more able to navigate this energy. And then, of course, she can also call me and knows that I know what it's like, etc. I think that's probably enough to go on for now. I'm feeling it's a bit different, not be able to hear you, Grace, and have it more as a conversation and just sort of a me talking.
Yes,
Hey,
Canela, I was just wanting to, hold on just a sec. Yeah, I was just wanting to let you speak. And at the beginning, it's good to just give, just lay out the terrain, as it were. And you did that beautifully with both your mother and yourself. I'm wondering, maybe one thing you haven't shared, you shared in general, but were there any significant moments when you felt, I have to mute you, Canela, because there is a lot of noise. So I'll unmute you when my question is over. Were there any significant moments in your experience of depression? Well, actually, two things. Maybe you could tell us how depression shows up. You told us energetically, but usually there's also there's certain thoughts or certain emotions that go with the depression. So maybe you could mention that too. And also, secondly, what were there any significant moments when you really felt like there was a deep insight about depression as it shows up in you, or a shift that happened for you?
Well, there's insights every single time, and I no longer kind of expect myself to not feel depression, and therefore there's very little fear around it. So that's quite different than it used to be, because, of course, even though there's the realized state, there was also this idea that such things ought not to show up in this open, vast emptiness. Like, what do you mean this is still here? What is this? And so there was a kind of a self-judgment on myself as a human being, that as if something was wrong with me. And so that was met gradually, and then it also through meeting it as it rises in the moment. That's what gives me the strength and courage to and knowing that it's okay, that this too is actually absolutely okay. In fact, it's another invitation from love. I do want to share, there's one aspect that I haven't shared is I did attempt suicide when I was 15. And even that became quite insightful. Um, what happened around that time is I had gotten kicked out of school, high school, and it happened that my grandmother was visiting, and so it intensified things at home. So when the school had called, my father was maybe a little more upset with me in the appearance of being a bad student, how that looked in the family, um, and that I was a disgrace. And my 15-year-old self, already low self-esteem, um, took that to be that I was unworthy to belong to my family, that I was a disgrace and a burden to them, and I would help them out by dying. So I definitely felt myself to be a burden, um, and thought I would do away with the problem and everybody be happier um, without me. And so I drank a glass of poison. Um, and what happened was the life force came and took me, and I just started vibrating, and I came so alive and full of light and then I started like, oh my gosh, I've already drank the poison. What do I do now? And so I actually did go and wake up my mother and said, Mom, I drank this poison. I wanted to die, but I don't want to die. I want to live. I really want to live. Help me. And she got up and helped me, and I stuck my finger down my throat and um, got sick, got it out somewhat out of my body. I was very sick the next day, and we didn't really know. Interestingly, my mother kind of forgot, glossed it over, or pushed that experience aside, and it was never talked of. The next day, my grandma was very uncertain of, how come this came on so suddenly, but nobody said anything, and I was just sick home from school. Well, I was already kicked out, but we were supposed to go and get me back in and whatnot, but I couldn't. Um, so that has been an incredible blessing, because if suicidal thoughts have arrived, and they have, where it feels like life isn't worthwhile to carry on, that it feels heavy and I don't seem to be getting it. Those are some of the thoughts. It seems like other people get some sort of something that seems vital that I don't have. Um, and and so I'll feel like it's not worthwhile to carry on. And in some ways I've experienced so much of life that I feel maybe it's just a fullness. Um, in the um, wild country where Osho seemed to, from the information, seemed to be also committing, considering letting go of his body and being injected with something to just complete. Um, Often there has been a feeling of completion and just a complete neutrality that, why spin on, in a way. But the beautiful part is that those are just thoughts. And I know that no matter what, from that experience when I was 15, that I can just kind of laugh at them and go, oh yeah, right. That's not a way. You're here to live this life and to carry on. So what is this about? And that's what's gotten me to explore it.
Mm-hmm.
To really say, okay, if all of life is love, what really is this? And to breathe and know in my mind that it must be love somehow, some way, even though it doesn't feel, it feels devastating, it feels heavy, it feels murky and dark. The opposite of life, in fact. That even those energies, even when I feel that way, when I breathe and open to that and be vulnerable to the moment and trust myself, I'm able to open to it. And it's always new and different. Sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's just if I was home, I'm visiting my sons, I have a piece of artwork that I just thought, okay, I'm just going to go and doodle when I was feeling dark. And out of my hand came all these ribbons of hearts, different colors. And I was like, I was laughing by the end because I was like, that's what came out of me, out of depression energy. Like, it flips. So, it is hard at first, but gradually trusting yourself and moving with it. It's through the direct experience of meeting this energy that um, it becomes known, and the steam of the depth of the energy and the strength of the energy minimizes. So it becomes an equal part of the play of what is, whether it's thoughts, whether it's energy, whether it's emotions. Um, Sometimes the universe needs us to have a really good cry.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the universe needs us to sit down with feeling unworthy instead of always convincing ourselves or trying to convince ourselves we're worthy. Well, if we're human, sometimes we feel unworthy. Sometimes we feel worthy. It doesn't matter, really. If there's a preference for one or the other, then of course, love will want to bring harmony to that and offer up unworthy. And when we open to that and find out, hey, it's okay, right? We ease that energy. We help to diffuse it in the collective oneness. And that's so worthwhile. So worthwhile. And it's also worthwhile for yourself and your direct experience, of course. Win, win, win.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Canela. And maybe that's a good point for me to come in. What do you think?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. All right. And maybe I'll just highlight a few points that Canela brought up and kind of take them into my own experience in life. One of them is that depression seems to be the opposite of life. And as I was reflecting on the topic and today's event, that's really what I came to. Actually, two things. One is that there seems to be an absence of life in depression. It's like it feels so dead. That there's something that feels very unalive in the experience of depression. Life that's depressed, literally, but also like the life force doesn't seem to, it doesn't seem to be part of the experience. There seems to be an absence where usually we feel something that's alive. And in my own reflections on my experience of depression, what I came to is that for me, the essence of depression has been really a sense of being separate from life. Like as a teenager, I was very depressed. I didn't have suicidal thoughts. I had suicidal fantasies, like what it would be like if I had died and people would stand around my grave and say, well, maybe we should have listened to her more or paid her more attention. So it was like a fantasy being, no longer being alive was actually a fantasy of being at peace and being loved, feeling part of life in some weird way. And I also would like to say that in my own case also there is a history of depression in the family. And in my own healing from depression, really what came up again and again is my maternal grandmother, who was kind of, she was never heavily depressed, but there was a sense of her life being very depressed. Her life force being very depressed by her life. And there was also a very Christian context to that. I grew up in a very Christian family and background, and depression wasn't named as such. You know, what was named, the way it was understood was, it was like the veil of tears, going through the veil of tears. And so depression wasn't seen as a mental issue or problem. It was seen as a spiritual problem or issue. You know, it was like a failure to be fully connected to God, or a failure so there was a lot of self-blame about that, and also shame. But there was something very truthful about that too, because, you know, my sense is these days, depression is just seen as a mental and emotional problem. It's not seen as a spiritual issue. And so actually allowing a spiritual perspective on depression can be very helpful. I wouldn't call it a veil of tears. Actually, in my own experience, insofar as that still so shows up, but it shows up so faintly that, you know, these days that I'm not really dealing with it full force anymore. But when it shows up, there's just a sense of being separate from life, of not being, there being an absence, there being an emptiness that's not alive. And for me, like for Canela, it's an opportunity to really just stop and take time and check what is this? What is just open to that experience? And I'd like to share one key experience that I had quite a number of years ago now, when I was still getting kind of times of depression that were quite marked. And I was feeling very depressed and very dark, very empty, very unalive. And I took time to, I'd come across my teacher Gangaji, and her invitation was always, whatever showed up, to inquire into that, to really see what is it that's here. So I decided to do that, and there was a sense of really just totally opening into this experience that at the time I was still very afraid of. And so I opened into it, and what seemed like a very dark, empty space revealed itself as the emptiness that I had been looking for in my spiritual searching. So somehow, now I don't know, it wasn't the same emptiness anymore, because that emptiness was very alive. So somehow in opening to that emptiness, it became the emptiness of life. It turned out to be the fundamental essence of our being, which is an empty, spacious beingness. That was very alive. And it was it was a real moment of turning for me, because after that, there was no longer any fear of the depression. And that's something that I know is often part of the experience of depression. You know, there are depressed states. And then there's like feelings about depression and thoughts about depression that come on top of that. Like the fear of depression coming back, or the self-loathing for still having to deal with that problem, or the shame of dealing with that, or it's simply a resistance to it. Oh no, I don't want to deal with that. You know, I'm this time I'm just going to take antidepressants. So any of that, it's like there's the depression, and then there's a second level of reaction to the depression. And in my experience, both my own and that of working with people, it's like when we see the resistance to it, whatever form it takes, fear, self-judgment, shame. When we see that reaction, we can first let go of that. And then we're willing and open to actually just inquire into this state that we call depression, this experience that we call depression. And then, as we do that, there can be thoughts, there can be other emotions, there can be there can be emotional colors, emotional tastes or tones. And that's when it's almost like when we inquire into what shows up as depression, we're actually back in life as it shows up in this moment. So that's why the energy can flip. That's why something else reveals itself. And like Canela says, can even be joy. It's never predictable quite what it will show up as. So, yeah, that's my own experience and reflections on it. I'm wondering, maybe, Canela, do you want to get back to?
Yes. Is the connection okay? Is it
Yes.
still okay?
It's still noisy. I'm muting
Yeah,
you.
I think it might be just the actual connection, because it was a little bit also when you were speaking. But thank you for what you shared. I do want to say one thing right off the bat is, I've been supporting people in the energetics of what is for 20 years, and 100% of the time, 100%, when people have opened to depression with me, with themselves, I'm not really, you know what I mean? We're always with each other. So
Yeah.
supporting them to open to it is to open to themselves that's all I can offer. But 100% of the time, it has always been an incredibly beautiful and loving thing. Not always in a loving feeling like, oh, love, but in the sacred, oh my goddess, oh my, what a gift. And so it comes sort of in these darker packages, sometimes. And you could call it Kalima too, that it is a kind of death, an opening to death. So I like that you pointed to that aspect of it, because the biggest aspect of the darkness is touching the void, is coming to the actual 0 point, or this place where it is actual death we don't know that the body will still be here, but the actual 0 point is lifeless, is neutral, is almost horrific in its nothingness, the lack of any kind of possibility of anything mattering whatsoever, because it's the place of no matter. So that's as far as I know, to come this awakened state and letting go of the world, that is part of what needs to be, I don't know, needs to be what's being invited to be experienced directly consciously is that 0 point, is that incredible dark neutrality that is nothing, that doesn't matter about whether there are children or adults or death or life or ice cream cones. Vegan ice cream cones, coconut milk. Can't help myself. I don't want to promote dairy products. Cow dairy. So, you know, that I could, so the compassion, it was not, when I experienced that myself, that incredible, probably the deepest death. I mean, there's many, many deaths to be faced, at least for myself. And sometimes people don't need to face that in this lifetime because they have in the past lifetime. So I'm not saying that it has to be this way, but it is quite common. It's not a pleasurable experience. And yet, out of nothing, something arrives. So we don't know that, and that's why it's scary and dark and horrible to face this death where nothing matters in the utmost literal sense. And my finding, and from what I've read of others in the realized awakened state of no state, is that out of nothing something arrives and life kind of starts again. You come down to nothing and then something new, you know, the phone rings. In my case, the phone actually rang. I had said, okay, and I lay the system, the body down on the floor and said, okay, consciousness, if this is the end, this is everything's come to nothing, absolutely nothing, including myself, that I guess that was it. And I lay the body down to let it go. And an angel came down, but looked like an angel, which was quite nice. And as it touched me, the phone rang. And in this dark, nothing, empty 0 point of nothing mattering, I watched myself get up and answer the phone quite curiously. And it was my beautiful friend, John Ananda, who called and said, Canela, look out the window. There's a beautiful sunset. It's so beautiful. He was calling me to not miss out on the beauty of being alive. And so life began again. That was in 1999, in around there. And I guess once it's been experienced, it doesn't need to be experienced again, at least so far. I have no idea. But it seems like life has gotten more rich in its display of its own self as from that point. Because the thing is, experiencing that, it's so obvious that all of this might not be happening. And so I can't, it's so utterly loving to be alive and be conscious and experiencing life no matter what it is, because it might be that nothingness. It gives a relativity to enjoying every bit of what's going on, not always in a direct, aha, joyful, but in a, wow, this now? Wow, out of all possibilities, wow. And then bowing to that, no matter what it is, because it's happening and I get to experience. I'm alive and I get to experience this. And there becomes such a reverence and a humbling beauty, gift, a moment by moment gift that life is. It's just known. It's not thought. It's experienced, and it's thought too, I guess. If somebody just said so. So yeah, thank you for that, Grace, because I did want to point to beautiful. It is a spiritual aspect of what's available, and can be stepping stones into the deepest parts of existence experiencing itself.
Yes, absolutely. And my senses, that actually brings me to another reflection, which is that, sorry, I'm going to have to mute you again.
That's okay. It's okay. I feel you. I feel with you anyway,
Yeah.
even though I can't hear your room. I can hear you.
Yeah. It's really on this theme of what is depression, and what's the opportunity, what's the what does it invite us? And my sense is that when there is an experience of depression, and when we do suffer with that, there is a resistance to it, and there's a resistance to life. In my own case, it took just the form of just not wanting this life because life was too painful. And so the separation from life is, it's really key, because when we wake up, we realize that this is it. Life has all this. It has the joy and the depression, the fullness and the emptiness, the everything matters, nothing matters experience. And it's like what you said, Canela, the humility of just realizing it's all part of life, it's all what is given, and we get to experience it all.
Sorry, Grace. Your mic, I think, is on your shirt or something.
Okay.
We can't hear you as well, and I'm sorry because what you were saying was so beautiful. I didn't want to interrupt, but at the same time. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Is this better? Yeah. Okay. So it's like experiencing, being willing and just totally open to experiencing it all, without wanting to screen anything out, without having ideas about what should be or shouldn't be happening, or what we should or shouldn't be feeling. And that's really where depression led me to. This and waking up led me to this realization that it was all an expression of this emptiness. And who was I to have thoughts about what should or shouldn't be happening? That's just silly, and then depression may or may not show up, and when it shows up, it gets received just as everything else. So I do see there is, somebody says it's hard to hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that was before.
No? Okay. Somebody shakes their head. So, okay, maybe I just need to hold my mic to the mouth. I know there's a bit of a... How is that? Is that good? Okay, good. All right. So, Canela, what do you think? Should we maybe open the floor to questions?
Sure. I want to actually, just one more thing that you reminded me of was the polar opposite of depression is often the manic energy. In fact, with one person who called for my support, you call her a client, but of course she's become a friend, we were able to go into, so I'm empathetic, so that's why I say we. So I feel it in my system when I'm with people in the support that I offer. And so together we went and dove into the depression, and it actually came down and went down and then sort of skipped over a section of what was happening for her in a way and leapt to the manic. And then adrenaline started to run, and it was quite interesting that within the one session time, we went both ways and then came back, right? But and this is often also what happens in people who often, not always, experience depression, is that then they'll also experience the other polar opposite, and then be attached to that wired, chemical, adrenaline filled experiencing of life, because it is so much more alive, but it's so much alive it gets reckless. And people often find that they do and say things, but they're so running with the manic energy, they don't want to stop it because they're afraid they're going to go down into the dark again. And then that keeps igniting, right? But both, it's to most people, when they look in the moment and see, are they being more than a momentary creation or a impulse, right? If it's staying steady kind of on, and there's less sleep, I mean, the adrenaline is so hard on the system to be always on, because that's a survival thing, to an energy that's meant for survival, to save us from a lion or some sort of situation, from being run over by a car or something like that, to get us out of the way quickly, and then it's over. So if adrenaline runs in the system for quite a while, it is very, very taxing on any long-term basis. So it's also an honesty with yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so when the manic energy can be there, it's to recognize that, and to feel that too, and open up to the fire of that kind of energy, and breathe to the lower belly, because that will support a serotonin. Either way, with depression or the manic energy, I recommend and invite people to breathe to the lower belly, put their hand on the lower belly, breathe into where your belly expands into your hand, and then when you exhale, your belly becomes close to the spine, and so your belly goes in. So that's a way that you can make sure that the breath is getting down into the lower belly, and that naturally ignites serotonin, which is a calming, peaceful energy. So that can also be used in any kind of anxiety or panic attack, to support yourself to a more steady, that you're okay in the moment. It also brings you to the moment. Prana is prana. So it's always good. Conscious breathing. Wonderful.
Beautiful. Um, so let's see. Let's see whether anybody would like to ask a question or share an experience with us. Like, just to remind you, if you want to raise your hand, you can click on the participants button and click on raise hand. Or I can also go to group view. I'm on group view right now, so you can kind of wave at me and I can unmute you. Or you can also make a comment on the chat. Okay, so Bill's raising his hand. Okay, Bill, I've unmuted you.
Yes, thank you, Grace and Canela, for being here and for sharing your personal experiences and giving us an opportunity to learn and grow from this. And I was wondering if you could share what happens to your relationships, or your, that feeling of moving towards them or away. I'm just wondering what happens there for you. Are you inclined to move towards them or away, or separate or isolate?
What's your experience, Bill?
Well, let's see. Yeah, I recently just went through kind of a going down. My blood pressure was going down, and there was one distinct moment where the words that came out of my mouth, it was like I felt like God left me, and it was like I came unplugged from the life force energy. And I felt kind of plugged back into my egoic energy, which, lacked aliveness. I think one way that I was, and just to say, I saw my oncologist, and she increased my steroid and blood pressure. And what I notice is that, like, hope is back, maybe not 100%, but I'm just feeling more hopeful and more willing to connect, and like I have a future, and some of my sense of humor is back, and but in terms of I'm going to my question now. In terms of relationship, as I was kind of going down and down, I felt like I was pulling away from relationships and isolating myself, and at the same time needing contact so that I wasn't alone in the darkness. So there was kind of a pull away, and yet a wanting to connect, but not connect through the darkness, wanting to connect through something more hopeful and optimistic. Yeah.
Can I respond? Is that all right, Grace?
Sure, go ahead, Canela.
You see, what you're sharing is like, of course. I mean, of course. And the key word is what you want, right? Rather than what is. So if there's any attempt to skip over the darkness, in order to get a lifeline to get out of it, that actually helps keep it there. The lifeline almost adds to the energy of the darkness. So whatever's happening inside, that you fall into that dark place as you shared, then that also, as you kind of move almost away from yourself and your living of yourself, also you move away from what appears on the outside, right? Both happen simultaneously. So on the inside, so on the outside. And so it's finding that point where if you've got a condition on how you want it to be, right, then to open to that condition first, wanting happening. You see, there was kind of a third player, if you will, in there, the darkness, and then over there, the wanting to connect and knowing that you needed to connect. As far as I know, so far, in my own experience and those people I've supported, the needing to connect is almost always the need to connect with yourself with exactly what's happening. So it's a calling from yourself to yourself. And what I've found when people fall into whatever it is and not giving up, like in a way of, just to the energetics, to breathing and being present with the moment, then often whatever is the right connecting with others in the apparent outside, what appears as the outside world or other people, shows up, and it's way easier, and it's done from a movement of being with what is, instead of a grabbing hold of, and try to save me and get me away from myself. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So And that's where it's so tricky. There's so much going on in each moment, and it's all these little, if you can find that you want to skip out on yourself, sit down, what does it feel like? The energy of skip out. What does that actually feel like? What does wanting or not wanting, pushing away, resistance to me, to what is always an opportunity that resistance itself will show you that something's ready to be met. And then to sit down with the energy of resistance and feel that prior to whatever it is that it appears to be resisting. It's kind of a segue. It's much softer, much easier, and also what's present.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. I had, I think about 3.5 weeks ago, bought some geraniums and was intending to put them into a larger container. And my neighbor had given me some potting soil, and it wasn't enough, and I had bought some more, and I just kind of forced myself, to sit out in the, out front in the parking lot and start to transfer the geraniums into this larger container. And my blood pressure was just so low, I couldn't stand up. And I know he saw me from inside his apartment and came out and just started helping me. And I was just so touched and moved. And, I find at this point in my life, as I connect more and more with my heart, just the slightest bit of generosity from somebody else, just moves me to tears. And, it kind of helps that part of me that kind of grew up in what appeared to me an unloving, world. It just kind of, proves that wrong. And I was watching some Tara Brach last night. And there was one moment in her talk where she was sharing her personal experience with depression, and she had this moment where she connected with, her own aware presence, and she realized that there was nothing wrong with her. And she had talked about struggling her whole life of feeling like there was something wrong with her, and I could identify with that. I know I had birth trauma, and I just came into this world like not feeling like I belonged or was welcomed or wanted, and so it's like that belief that I've been identifying with my whole life is now being challenged, by the truth of my experience of the awareness that I am, that there, at my core nature, there is nothing wrong with me.
Yes.
That I am love, that I am peace, and no matter what I experience in this body, there's always that aware presence that, that doesn't have low blood pressure.
Right, right. I too grew up in a very unwelcoming, I was from the start a burden. There's all the details around that, but I'll just say that I meet you there in that. And a way that I found in supporting myself is to really celebrate who I am. The little things, to be the one when I recognize, especially if I could remember where I wasn't welcomed as a child, right in that moment, to look in the moment and be creative about how I can welcome myself.
Mm.
And it's not to create an independence of not needing other people, but more to nourish this man, this boy, this child, because you're the one that knows what you've been through. You're the one that knows how you came to be who you are as you are.
Mm.
So well, nobody else can know that so well as you, that you have the perfect medicine to, in the moment, give yourself. And then I find when that happens, the other people just follow suit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've often found that even though people might really want to be supportive and come forward, until I do for myself, it doesn't quite land. You know, I could have thoughts that say, oh, they're just saying that, they're just being nice, they don't mean it. You know, whereas when I relish my own beauty, when I relish my silly, crazy human kid nutso weirdness, you know, when I smile to myself in the darkness, say,
Mm.
come on, Canela, let me take you for a cup of tea. All right, you know, or I talk in the mirror and look at her, and then I imagine what would I give for somebody else in this moment if I knew they were in this position? What could I say? What could I do? And I say that to myself.
Mm.
Sometimes it's so much easier to see how I could support someone else rather than myself, because we're just not oriented that way, or most of us aren't, in how to take care of this gorgeous, beautiful man, boy, child, whatever appears in the moment, right? To take him by the hand and let him know that you're here and you'll never leave. Never.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about that, because I feel like I feel I do a lot of loving things towards myself, but I haven't known how to truly receive it. You know, like it's been more intellectual, and I feel I'm learning how to receive it through my body, through my heart. And, you know, one thing I'm finding myself doing is just, you know, putting my hand gently on my heart, you know, not heavy or hard as if to push into it, but just gently. That kind of, it feels like it beckons my heart outward. It and gives me a more embodied, energetic experience of the aliveness of my heart, and it's like then, you know, I start to feel that love for myself. It kind of breaks through the numbness, the kind of dissociation, and you know, the fragmentation away from my heart. And there's just this, there's just this, you know, wanting to like celebrate and live into, you know, the uniqueness that is wanting to be expressed through Bill.
Are you feeling that now?
Yeah, and also, you know, just the grieving sadness of kind of suppressing that wanting my whole life. You know, it's like that. I feel like most of my life I've tried to fit in, and you know, I've been called eccentric, and I'm just, you know, beginning to embrace, you know, the totality of my uniqueness, and therefore the need to like own that, you know, like fully own it, you know, in my body, in my heart, you know, like it's no good to just own it up here. So it's like there's a wanting to celebrate and live into that uniqueness. And that's when, like when I felt like that plug, that life force plug come undone about 2 weeks ago, you know, I was scared, you know. But now that I'm back on, you know, a higher dose of the medication, and I feel more here, more present. And I know eventually I'll taper off of the medication, but it's like I learned some valuable things about, well, myself and also my relationship to the medication that I currently need to be on. So,
Step by step, and what serves you and is caring for you. Absolutely.
yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Beautiful. I love that you're taking good care of yourself.
yeah. And it's like something, you know, just that life force energy that wants to express itself and celebrate its uniqueness. It's almost like, you know, a birth, you know, that never happened yet in my life. And now it's kind of like you can see the crest of the head, you know.
Beautiful. Birthing yourself. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Bravo. And remember, birth, I mean, as a mom, can be a little painful as that head comes.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
the birthing process can be a bit of labor, right? But uh,
Right.
as best you can, relaxing, open to the process as you get emerged more and more fully and consciously, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's life can be lived, but the depth of it, when it's consciously touched and felt as it emerges, this is like a river trickling through your hands,
Mm.
touched and known, and you get to be with this gorgeousness uh,
Mm.
of being alive as you.
Mm.
It's beautiful. I love it. And you just say 2 weeks ago that how wonderful.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
um, bravo, first off, for deciding to get pregnant.
Yes. Yes.
And willing to be birthing yourself
Yeah.
and yeah, and accompanying yourself on the way that's right for you. Right? I had ideas when I was giving birth that I would go drugless and all that stuff, but the reality and the circumstances, um, became otherwise, and so I leaned on aspects of consciousness that were there to support me, and I hear
Mm-hmm.
you doing the same. Beautiful,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Bill. And,
Mm.
I maybe would just add that how do I say that? It's so easy to connect with the joy and the love and the aliveness of ourselves. And it's so much more, um, so much less fun to embrace the tiredness and the lack of aliveness and however life shows up, the absence of life, because that's how it can show up too. And, I'm not against medication or anything. I mean, if you feel you needed it at the time, that's great. It helped you. At the same time, I'd say, if it ever shows up again, why not take a few moments and and really just be willing to be that fully, that tired, that unalive, that depressed, and really just find out, how can life be like this, because life is, it does show up in these opposites. It's what it's all about. It's dual, right? So it shows up as joy and sadness. It shows up as aliveness and feeling not alive. And so much of our spiritual searching initially is driven by our suffering, our pain, our not feeling alive. And the idea is that, oh, once I've woken up, then I'll be fully alive, But it's not like that. Life is still happening in those opposites. And so sometimes you have lots of energy and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel good, other times you don't. And that's just fine. There's nothing whatsoever wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with you for feeling like that. It's just, that's the wholeness of life. That's the allness of life, So let's not try and screen out what doesn't feel good, because that's where we separate out from life. So I see that Paul has raised his hand, so I'm just going to, thanks again, Bill.
Yeah.
And I'm going
Thank
to,
you.
I'm going to unmute Paul. Okay, go ahead, Paul. You're unmuted.
Hi.
Hi.
So, what I want to share is that the sense of being depressed to some extent is something that I would say is deeply incorporated into my identity, my egoic identity, you might say, and it's so familiar that it's just the MO, for me. So as you were just saying a minute ago, I think that's what drives the spiritual seeking, is the suffering associated with that. And so what I'm hearing today is, I suppose, a message that I've heard, 1,000 times before. and it actually generates, to some extent, an even higher level of hopelessness, because it's like, yeah,
Excellent.
I've been doing that.
Can you find the hopelessness right now? Where is it in your body? If you look inside, if you can say there's hopelessness here, there's something, for you to be able to say that, there has to be some sort of energy that's present in your body right now. Can you find it right now?
Yeah.
Okay, and then feel the chair. Relax the rest of your body open, so it's sort of giving more space for this energy. And breathe. Can you tell me where it is?
I don't know why I'm laughing. I just feel this laugh. It was, as soon as you asked me to do that, something shifted. I can feel. Yeah, right. And if I ask myself to do it, nothing freaking happens.
Up until now, when you've asked yourself, because this is yourself asking you, and you just found it, right? So that's your directly happened. You've been aware of it, and you're the one that did that, not me. I can't find hopelessness in your body. Only you can.
Well, it's all very mysterious how.
So what's happening now?
Unfolds.
What's happening now?
Well, what's happening now? I'm just feeling this odd compulsion to smile.
Me too. I've given away to it. Little joy too. Sorry about that, but no. Beautiful. Yeah. Very, very close with yourself.
So I can feel something a little bit more alive in my chest. There's some sense of energy there, whereas previously it was, empty and just really empty and desolate.
Right then. Yeah, right. It's just it's so straightforward. It's just not what the collective humanity is so much more used to grabbing a hold of the surface of the ocean, the waves, and saying, I don't like this wave, I like that wave. And it's all waves of love saying, hello, come on in and taste the wave directly. And you'll find it's the big ocean, right? I mean, you've heard that, right? I mean, it's showing up.
Yeah,
That
sure.
analogy is showing up. I'm sure you've heard of that before. Most people have. They've been looking at waking up to the truth of what's happening. So it's just not what most of humanity is doing yet. So the waves are going to be taken seriously until somebody stops and says, hey, I'm taking something seriously. And then you sit down with something seriously happening. The energy of something serious, right? It's so directly related to however the mind encapsulates the moment and says, this is how I feel. This is how I am. I want this. Then you can stop and go, okay, wanting happening. It's so literal, and in any language.
This is really fascinating to me, this little experience, because of the contrast between what typically happens if I inquire
What used to happen.
or yeah. As I guess you were just alluding to, there's a sense of it being a serious endeavor.
Us humans. I mean,
what is this? This horrible emptiness, this profound separateness from life. What is that? How do I feel? How do I open to feeling that fully? And it just, I find that I trying to do that with feelings in general, not just this particular sense of depression, but fear, anxiety, lots of feelings, that something is always keeping it somehow at bay.
well,
And
there's
I want to
it
add,
used to be, right? Because these are things that happen prior to now with your own direct experiencing of just falling into the complete simplicity of the moment. And that's the piece that's so vital. It's the moment, because the moment can only hold as much as it does. Yes, it holds infinity, but awareness as showing up as you can only be aware of what awareness is aware of in the moment, right? So the moment is the spot to meet yourself no matter what. And you hear that, but it's like there's such a almost a guy wire out there that we're so used to going outside of ourselves, say this happens or that happens, and then that reflects back on us, and then that means we're less than or more than or blah blah blah, right?
yeah.
Whereas when you bring all those guy wires in to where you actually are and just sit down with the simplicity of the humanness, not looking for the absolute bliss or whatever, or there's looking for the absolute bliss happening, right?
Yeah.
The seriousness, the looking for absolute bliss, the looking for the emptiness, all of those, I mean, are they human or what? And awareness is here experiencing itself as a human being. So of course they're going to be here. Awareness is experiencing itself as you. And the filters of perception are made up of all the experiences that you've ever experienced as awareness. So it's learning its own self in the flavor of who you are in this moment. And it's going to be unique.
Yeah.
So it's essential that you are the one that drops in with who you are and ascertains and able to identify using the mind as its natural apparatus as part of consciousness itself, to just simply touch what's going on so you can identify what to sit with and then sit with it, whatever it is, and get more and more subtle of the variance and the layers in between, like the wanting or the seriousness, right? Rather than the actual goal out there. The goal just shows up as an interest so that you get to meet all the layers of yourself in between.
I do understand exactly what you're referring to when you say layers in between, because and those are the layers that tend to get overlooked in everyday mind, you know. But
Used to.
and yeah, and when I see those layers, it's like I keep stepping backwards, like you know, taking, oh, and that's arising, oh, and that, now that's what's arising, and it almost gets comical, you know, at that point, the sense, and there's a real sense of non-existence. Maybe that's, I suppose the more typically used word would be simple awareness. It's like this weird dance of, okay, yeah, awareness is here, and that's what's observing every single phenomena, no matter how subtle. And then there's
Exactly.
like, there's still this, including the sense of me, you know, the kingpin.
Well,
You know, there's still a sense.
and there is, because I mean, that's the trickiest part. There is awareness showing up as this me. It's just that it doesn't have any longevity. If it's taken as the moment, that there's this humanness that's made up of all the moments that you've ever experienced and all the moments that are to come, because there is no other moment but this one. However, there's been some experiencing happening. It's just how it all plays out. And so the me is here. That's the aspect of the humanness. And I totally recommend not trying to get rid of that, unless you get to sit down with trying to get rid of it happening. Because in a lot of spiritual invitations, if you will, it's as if to get rid of this, what they say, the little self or something, or the ego and all that. And you know what? Every bit has its place here in existence because we can name it. It's already here.
Yeah.
It has its place in the oneness. And so it's a much more practical, all of it counts, every bit. And it's how you in particular meet the moment and meet these aspects, because there's no other one like you. It's what Bill was talking about this uniqueness. Awareness is showing up as this one, as you in each moment. It has an appearance of you, but it's just so you can touch it and know it and then be with it. Because that's the conscious part. It's identification and then opening to that which appears and feeling it as it flies. Experiencing it, because that's how consciousness becomes more conscious of its own self. And that's the game. It's just wanting to know itself more deeply. And it brings harmony to itself as that happens. So that's where the loving aspect, in my own opinion, comes in, is that harmony is always being invited.
I guess that the more that I see everything arising as just something arising in awareness, I think I tend to get a sense of further disconnection from the uniqueness components, if you will. you know, there's a further movement into a sense of self as awareness. And then everything else is just, I just begin to see as an object
Okay.
of awareness.
So I understand what you're saying.
Personal.
The more neutral aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this moment, are you in touch with the vastness?
Maybe slightly.
So, you know, and it might be for other people who
some-
are listening in this too, or the video in the future. But if you can rest into that, it does feel very neutral, spaciousness, infinity, right? If you settle into your chair, relax, open, and let go of the body while you breathe, and you can feel the room, right? You can feel the world outside your building, and it goes on for infinity of what awareness is aware of. And there's a way, just by not knowing it from your mind, but just if you feel drawn to take me up on this invitation, I invite you to invite the vastness into the cellular structure that shows up here as a human being. So it's relaxing your body open and simply inviting infinity in to live in each cell consciously, just now, into the brain tissue, to the hair follicles, to your toes, breathing.
As I endeavor to do that, first thing I notice is I'm not quite sure what inviting is. I mean, I have a conceptual understanding of it, and even some of an idea of sort of an energy that goes with it.
You know the feeling when you're calling a dog or a cat and you say, come on, that's it. The same feeling of what it feels like to invite somebody. It's just simply saying, hello, vastness, and relaxing your body open because you know that there's more space than there is molecules here, right? The atoms and everything firing. We know when we look through a microscope that...
Well, that might seem to you like something quite self-evident in terms of calling a cat or a dog, but if I actually imagine myself doing that, what I feel is more of a sense of anxiety and control. It's kind of like, hey dog, get the hell over here.
Really?
You know,
really? Oh, okay. I didn't know. I don't know how you invited a dog in.
I mean, I might on the surface be friendly and you know, part of me always wants to operate with kindness and with an
have you
the
experienced
energy of
genuine
making requests, not demands. But I think that
invited anybody truthfully then? Can you remember at all any time that you've ever been invitational, that you've invited somebody into your house or bowed to someone, invited them in with you?
well, I can't say yes or no to that question.
Okay, beautiful.
I had some sort of a barrier go up, it seems, when I was a kid, some sort of protective barrier that does
is
not.
It here right now? I mean, and I know that Grace is okay. Grace, is that all right to keep going with this?
We will have to come to a close, Canela.
Okay.
But,
Okay. So it's just an invitation for you, Phil, to... is that your name's Phil, right?
Paul.
Paul, sorry, Paul. I had the P right.
Very good.
This invitation to you would be, because you can name this barrier, it's likely still here, right? A part of the system of how you've learned to live through your life, just so you could make it to this point of this moment. So I invite you to explore and see if that can be found, this barrier, and open to that by feeling it. Breathing, feeling. It can be layers. No rush. There's no rush because the moment never goes away, right? It's always here. Just so you know.
Yeah. No, that's worth saying, because as time seems to continue passing, it's like, when's my life going to start? And there is an urgency can come from that. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I didn't mean to rush you. and I would maybe just add to what Canela invited you to do. Whatever, your life is already happening. It's already started. And the challenge may be more to be willing for it to be exactly as it is right now, and to not have any conceptions about what it should be like, what should be showing up, to really just not know what is supposed to be happening and how you are supposed to be living your life. My sense is, well, if this is what's showing up, this is what needs to show up, because somehow that's your path. Our path is always exactly what's showing up. And if there's a difficulty with the word inviting, use something that maybe is possible for you, that makes sense to you. Whether it's just simply the willingness to experience this, or whatever this is, and to not bring in any conceptions about who you are, what's always happening, what happens if I do this, I don't get it, all that kind of thing. That's just thoughts, right? It's a way of not being simply here with what's here. And that's really what this is all about, whether life shows up as depression or as grief or as anything else, despair, powerlessness, all of the things that we're trying to avoid. It's simply a willingness to show up to that, however it shows up in the moment. Willingness to feel that. And you'll be feeling it not just for yourself, but for everybody else.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, with the invitation thing, I realized that underneath my initial description of guardedness and control, that isn't true, that I've never been engaged with an inviting energy, but there was this layer was kind of in the way. The more I just looked at that and felt that, it did give way to finding a more inviting energy is available.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, you can only be with what presents itself in each moment.
Yeah.
And then it changes.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thank you, Paul. I'm aware that somebody else has raised her hand. Neve has raised her hand. So I'm just calling on you shortly, Nick. Let me see. Where are you?
And Paul, if you could mute your microphone, that would be great.
Will do.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Canela. I'm trying to find Neve here on my list. Hold on. There you are. Okay, Neve, you're unmuted. And you could also bring your video in if you can.
Okay, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm. Oh wait, now just see. I just don't. Oh yeah. Okay, perfect.
Here you are.
Okay, great. Hiya. Hi. Yeah, I just wanted. Canela, can I just ask? Was I the client you were talking about? When you mentioned about working with that energy.
Thank you for sharing that you've worked with this energy together. Yes, we have, but no, you aren't actually.
Okay, because
It came full circle within the one session
oh yeah.
with somebody else. Yes.
No, because it sounded similar, but I just wanted to share because so it was more, I wanted to share what I found really helpful with working with this energy that might be helpful for the other men that spoke, because I could very much and maybe this might help, because I could very much identify with what they were talking about, and I just wanted to share that for years I felt that that type of dark energy um, just be there. It would be there and it would come up and it would kind of wrap me and nearly suffocate me, and feel like the life was being sucked out of me. And then how I coped with it is that I would be very busy, and I would distract myself. And busyness could take loads of different vehicles. But a couple of weeks ago, Canela and myself worked with it. And I had a kind of realization, or I had a kind of, there was a shift when it was happening the last time, and it was building, the darkness was building for a while. And I had a kind of a realization that, oh, wow, this is kind of the energy that I think generational of my family have gone through this, because there's been suicides. So I kind of, rather than drowning in it, it was like, oh, this wants to be met. And what really helped in the session, Canela, and it has really made a massive shift, I think, was when it wasn't trying to push it away or remove it, or, wishing it to be different. And it was when you asked me, because invitation and all those words might be difficult, but actually it was when I kind of did this exhale and allowed the whole lot to be here. It was like, you know what, I'm just going to give into this suicidal energy. So it was like nearly allowing myself to die in it, but even though I didn't die. But it was that just a total and utter kind of surrender to it, of, I'm just letting it all down, kind of, I want to say fuck it, so I hope that's okay. But it was that kind of, all right, I just totally give up. I'm not fighting this. And it was a total kind of letting go. But actually, when I did that, that's when the heaviness really moved, and it kind of lifted itself, I feel,
Yeah, the surrender.
But yeah, and it's so I've heard all that language before and those words, but it was kind of, I don't know, I just thought it might help, and I don't know, does that, but it was, it was that kind of, the really just succumbing to it, and then in that succumbing, it really lifted, and what I found actually since is that underneath that, now it was like there was a grief, but that's okay, and I allowed that to come. But now what I'm seeing is like underneath that is I'm actually feeling, and this might be helpful to the men that have spoken, it's like I actually finally feel like I'm stepping in, like the whole of me is stepping into a power or something. It's like I feel strong, you know.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Neve, because that's the part that's so exciting, from my perspective, about the whole world. And if we can invite people who have experienced such things like depression, that's an energy that's available. That is strength and power. And if we can access and open to that, it's almost like this whole other realm of possibilities as that becomes allowed to move freely in the world, consciously, freely, right? So there's such a great opportunity if there's all this held back energy that we get to open to and let unfurl itself. The existence as it is.
And I think it's maybe when you've succumbed to that, there's nothing else after that. Do you know? So I think
there is.
Well, or no, but like,
you know, like just say it might not be always, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know that greatest fear. So like, so if I'm honest, my greatest fear was, you know, because there's been yearnings to want to go. There's been so much pain, you know, and deep yearnings, but deep yearnings of being trapped because I can't, because I know the devastation. So, so what's been very, I don't know, there's kind of a freedom and kind of going there, but really not going there. You know what I mean? It's like I energetically did.
It presents, but you're not engaging.
Yeah.
In the way
Yeah.
that you used to, right?
Yeah. So I feel
that's the freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I actually, when we went through that energy and I really felt it all, as painful as it was, I actually feel like I felt my father is part of what he experienced when he committed suicide, you know, and it was just feeling that, allowing it, because it kind of felt like it was part of me, and then it's gone, you know, or it's
and like a meeting of your father, right?
Yeah. So
oh, beautiful.
I just felt I could really identify with everything the two men were talking about, and I just thought I would share this because maybe there might be something they might get out of this that might help. So thank you.
Thank you, you lovely woman.
Thanks.
Thank you, Neve. You know what you're sharing really is true surrender, and it's always good to hear that when we do surrender, when we do give in to this, whatever it is, when we do just say, okay, have me, you know, then invariably something can open up, something can shift. And we don't open to it, we don't invite it because we want something to shift. Because then it's just another thought of what we want to happen. We're really just willing to drown in it. And that's when it can do what it will. That's when we're back to life in that moment. So we've gone very over time. Canela, I wonder whether you want to maybe just say something to sum up from your side?
I guess, besides the invitations that happened within the recording, to really encourage people to trust themselves. They're the ones that is here with who they are and all the nuances of being alive as this person that's been given to you, that consciousness is playing itself out as. And that the very fabric of all of it is love, even when it doesn't at first look like love. So that can be quite encouraging and supportive, especially in exploring these darker bits of what happens in the humanity. It's just that you're human, that you're experiencing this. There's nothing wrong or nothing right. It's because you're human. It's an opportunity. And thank you, Grace, for this opportunity to share about this topic in particular, because it is often one that's been brushed under the rug, and beautiful to speak openly about it.
Well, thank you, Canela, and thank you all for being here, for sharing what you shared. And you know, my intention really is for this to be an invitation to look newly, freshly, and deeply into your own experience of what depression is, because invariably it'll be very interesting what you find, and it may not be what you think it will be. So that's really the invitation, always, and whatever shows up, is to experience that, you know, and to allow life to be that, and to become aware of that fully. So, wishing you all well in that, and thank you again, Canela.
Thank you, Grace.
All.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. And if you'd like to keep in touch with other events, online events, please sign up to the newsletter, which you'll find on living-from-love.com. If you want to be in touch with Canela, you can go to canelamichelle.com. That's her website. And we'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye, everybody, and thank you for coming
Bye-bye,
too.
everybody.